What if I told you that every single person who worked the night shift at Westfield Medical Center mysteriously quit within their first week? And the only records we have of what actually happens after midnight come from a janitor's personal diary that was found abandoned in a supply closet. Today I'm going to walk you through the most disturbing entries from someone who called himself the Paranormal Janitor. And trust me, what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about those empty buildings you pass at night. My name is Mike Chen, and I've been investigating unexplained phenomena for over 8 years. This particular case landed on my desk 3 months ago when a hospital administrator reached out, desperate for answers about their impossible staffing problem. But before we dive into these spine-chilling diary entries, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we're about to uncover something that will fundamentally change how you view the world around you. Let me set the scene for you. Westfield Medical Center is a 200-bed facility built in 1987 on what was previously farmland outside of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Nothing unusual about its history. No tragic accidents during construction. No mysterious deaths in the early years. It's your typical mid-sized hospital serving a rural community. But something changed in 2019. The night shift custodial position became what the staff privately called the cursed job. The hospital went through 17 different night janitors in just 2 years. Some quit after 1 shift. Others made it 3 or 4 nights before disappearing without notice. The longest anyone lasted was 6 days. And that person left behind nothing but a resignation letter that simply said, "I can't unsee what I've seen." Enter Thomas Mitchell, a 34-year-old former military maintenance worker who took the job in October 2023. Unlike his predecessors, Thomas was methodical, analytical, and apparently, he kept detailed records of his experiences. What makes his account particularly compelling is that he lasted 3 full weeks before vanishing, giving us the most comprehensive documentation of whatever was happening in those halls after midnight. The diary was discovered 2 days after Thomas stopped showing up for work. Maintenance found it wedged behind a water heater in the basement supply room, wrapped in plastic like he was trying to preserve evidence. The handwriting starts neat and organized, but becomes increasingly erratic as the entries progress. His first entry is dated October 15th, and it reads like standard job observations. He notes the building's quirks, the rattling ventilation system, the way certain fluorescent lights flicker in the east wing. But even in this first entry, there's an undercurrent of unease. He mentions hearing what sounds like conversations coming from empty patient rooms, but when he investigates, he finds nothing but standard medical equipment and that antiseptic smell that seems to follow you everywhere. By the third night, Thomas begins documenting specific locations where he consistently experiences what he calls atmospheric disturbances. Room 237 in the cardiac wing makes his flashlight dim and causes an overwhelming sense of being watched. The pediatric ward's playroom somehow accumulates toys in the center of the floor, despite being locked and empty. Most disturbing, the morgue's temperature readings fluctuate wildly on his handheld thermometer, dropping as low as 40 degrees in spots while maintaining normal readings just feet away. What sets Thomas apart from other witnesses is his systematic approach. He starts timing these phenomena, mapping their locations, even attempting to document them with his phone's camera. But here's where things get really interesting. Every photo he takes shows nothing unusual, yet his written descriptions become increasingly specific and detailed. It's as if whatever he's experiencing exists in a space that traditional recording methods can't capture. The entry from October 25th marks a significant escalation. Thomas writes about encountering what he describes as shadow figures that move independently of any light source. These aren't the typical peripheral vision tricks your mind plays in dark spaces. He describes figures that pause when they notice him watching, figures that seem to communicate with each other through gestures he can't quite make out in the darkness. But the most chilling aspect of Thomas's documentation isn't the supernatural encounters themselves. It's his gradual realization that these entities seem to be studying him just as intently as he's studying them. By the second week, he's convinced that they're learning his routine, anticipating his movements, even attempting to manipulate his behavior by creating disturbances that lead him to specific areas of the hospital. The October 30th entry reveals something that makes this case particularly unique. Thomas discovers that he's not the first person to document these experiences. Hidden in various locations throughout the hospital, he finds notes, sketches, and observations left by previous night shift workers. Some are scratched into wall paint behind equipment. Others are folded and tucked into ceiling tiles. Each one corroborates his experiences while adding new disturbing details. One note, apparently left by someone who worked the position in 2020, includes a rough map of the hospital with areas marked as safe zones and danger zones. The danger zones correspond exactly with the locations where Thomas has been experiencing his most intense encounters. Another note warns about the basement level, specifically advising future workers to never go down there alone after 2 a.m. The final entries in Thomas's diary become almost frantic. His handwriting deteriorates, and his observations take on an urgency that suggests he knew his time was running out. On November 4th, he writes about hearing his name being called from the hospital's public address system during hours when the system should be inactive. Security footage from that night shows him responding to these calls, walking purposefully toward the source, but the audio captures no announcements whatsoever. His last entry, dated November 6th, is the most disturbing of all. Thomas writes that he's figured out why no one lasts more than a few weeks in this position. According to his theory, whatever inhabits Westfield Medical Center after dark isn't just observing the living world, it's recruiting for something he calls the permanent night shift. He believes that each person who works long enough begins to see more, experience more, until they cross some invisible threshold and become part of whatever exists in those shadowed corridors. The entry ends with a single line that sent chills down my spine when I first read it. Thomas wrote, "I understand now why the others left without their belongings. When you finally see what's really waiting in the darkness, running becomes the only rational response. But I think I've stayed too long. I think they're ready for me to join them." Thomas Mitchell was never seen again after that shift. His car was found in the hospital parking lot with his keys still in the ignition. The diary remains the only evidence of what he experienced during those 3 weeks, and hospital administrators have permanently eliminated the night shift custodial position. The building is now cleaned during daylight hours only, and even day shift workers report avoiding certain areas of the hospital whenever possible. What makes this case so compelling isn't just the detailed documentation, but the pattern it reveals. Westfield Medical Center represents something far more unsettling than a simple haunted building story. It suggests that there are places in our world where the boundary between the living and something else becomes dangerously thin, and sometimes people get caught in that space between. If this investigation fascinated you as much as it did me, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into cases that challenge everything we think we know about reality. And remember, the next time you pass an empty building at night, consider that maybe it's not as empty as it appears. Sweet dreams, everyone.